I've been here at Covenant College for about 20 years. Before coming to Covenant, I taught at a public university outside of Philadelphia. Um, my training is that of a painter, so I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts from an art school in Philadelphia called Temple University, and I did my MFA, my Master of Fine Arts in Painting at Yale back in 1992. Uh, and I'm a color field landscape painter. I guess that's the best way I like to call it. When I came to Covenant in the fall of 2000, I met a young woman by the name of Alyssa Mather, who now has a new last name. Her name is Alyssa Whitebroad, uh, who was interested in art and wound up studying art history someplace. So that's my cue to introduce you to my colleague, Alyssa, Dr. Whitebroad.
Like Professor Morton said, I'm Alyssa Weichbrot. I teach art history at the college. This is the end of my 7th year now, which is kind of remarkable to me.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. So I did go to Covenant as an undergrad and had a really, really wonderful experience there. Was really challenged to think about why we make art, what art can do for the church, what Christians can learn from art, and was mentored really, really well by Professor Morton and by others. So after I graduated, took a little bit of time off, and then I went to St. Louis and I did my master's and my PhD at Washington University in St. Louis. And when I was wrapping up my PhD, there was miraculously an opening at Covenant College, and it was my dream job to be able to come back and to be able to work with Professor Morton and to especially give students the same kind of attention and mentoring and challenge that I had received as an undergrad. So I teach all art students take at least 3 classes from me. You have to take 3 art histories. So I teach a survey class, an intro to art history class that sort of teaches you the kinds of questions that art historians ask, and it's like a Western survey. And then I have a number of upper division electives that include things like art in the church, race and American art, women, art and culture, history and theory of photography. What am I forgetting? Oh, global modernisms. And then I also teach a class on contemporary art and theory. And I do a good bit with our senior experience as well. So that's me.
I am one of the admissions counselors here at Covenant, also an alum, but also philosophy major. But I did get to take 3 of your classes, right? I think so, at least 3. I love the art department. A lot of my really dear friends were art majors or minors. Maybe it would be helpful to talk about kind of like, I mean, it's my favorite thing because it's more philosophical, but the mission or the approach to art that we take at Covenant that might be different.
Yeah, I think I'd like you to hear from both of us. I'm a studio practitioner. I make art and I teach a lot of the studio courses. And Dr. Whitebroad, of course, teaches art history and some theory. And maybe it's that theory. It's that in my mind, theory sort of addresses the question is why do we make art, or rather than asking the question, is it art? We ask like the philosophers ask the question, is it art? We ask the question, why is it art? And so for us, or at least for me, a good bit of our conversation really is focused on where art exists within our culture, the cultures of the past as well as the culture of the moment. And we do think and believe that art has a real ability to speak to the other, that is to speak outside of ourselves, to in many ways to sort of address some really deep questions about meaning, and that's connected to our theology of how we understand and how we think about God. But art extends beyond just the vertical reach. It has a horizontal one. It's social. And I like to think that art sort of meets the viewer at eye level. It sort of addresses where he or she is at in the moment. And so when I teach our students, I really have spent a good bit of time of thinking about how does this artwork speak to a particular audience? How does it help us understand our humanity, and in particularly our finitude, that we are finite and we are material. We don't run away from material or materialism, because God seems to affirm the material world by calling his creation good. So our department, in terms of our practice, of how we make and what we make and why we make, is really rooted in how we understand God's participation in creation, why God even made creation. We are makers after all. So that's a little heady, but it certainly is stuff that guides my practice and my teaching.
Yeah, so unsurprisingly, I agree with what Professor Morton just described. We do work in the same department. But as an art historian, one of the things that's most compelling to me about what I get to do is to help people develop their ability to look, to see others, to see stories the way that God does. And so I think a lot about my role as an art history teacher is helping folks first to be able to look well, to look closely, to take to be able to interact with objects and images in a meaningful way, but then to also be able to ask questions like, how does this help me love God better? How does this help me love my neighbor better? And sometimes it can feel a little bit, it can seem pretty straightforward. So when I look at a really beautiful 19th century American landscape painting, and I see these big mountains and a crystal clear lake and a waterfall, and it's beautifully rendered. It's very, very detailed. That feels a little easy to say, oh, yes, this directs me in doxological praise, right? Like this helps me appreciate God's creation better. Other times, I really think that artworks that challenge us, artworks that are asking hard questions from us, can be the avenues that help us love our neighbor better. So artworks, for example, by African American artists that are dealing with the particular history and trauma of their past and present. If we take those works seriously, if we allow them to kind of act on us, to interrogate us, then to be faithful, we need to respond well with them. Those become part of how we understand the world. And so in that sense, artwork can also direct us towards lament, right? Where we're looking at the sad things from the past and we are acknowledging the brokenness of our world. But maybe the one that's most exciting to me, because it has had a formative impact on my own spiritual life, is just thinking about how artworks can also direct us to confession. So how, when we look at an artwork, say by Paul Gauguin, where he goes to Tahiti and he's making these paintings of his idea of a so-called primitive culture, and they're very objectifying, and even while they're formally pleasing and innovative, there may be a tendency on our part to say, well, that was wrong, so we should cancel Gauguin. And I think as Christians with a robust theology of our sin nature, we should instead be saying, how am I like Gauguin? Right? Like what are places that I dehumanize others in the stories that I tell about them or how I perceive them? And so for me, this perhaps links up with what Professor Morton was saying about art being social. That it's horizontal. It's facing our neighbor. But there's also so many ways that art can change us when we look faithfully at it, and that's what I'm really excited to be able to teach my students.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I wonder if y'all could maybe speak in a little bit to what are the things, or where are some places that an undergraduate in art can take you?
So I'll speak to that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the Covenant College student, and also about the idea of where it can take you. What I found about the Covenant College student is many of the students are asking the question, what does God want me to do? Where am I called to work? Rather than the Covenant College student coming to me and saying, I need to do X, can you tell me how to get there? And so I do think that one of the big points for us as professors and advisors is really helping students discern and step into the question of, what am I going to do? Or where is this going to take me? So rather than having a list of things that you're going to do, we want to kind of listen to the student and find out what she or he values. That said, we are very firmly interested in creating opportunities for students to explore vocation, whether it's through internships at local design firms, or with photographers, or with arts organization like this partnership we have in Indianapolis, that we are interested in vocation. The other thing we realize about the artist, which is different than the engineer, it's not meaning to marginalize the engineer, is that the artist needs to learn how to be innovative and to pivot, and certainly engineers need to do that too. But what we want to do is to create skills in which students, our graduates, can to participate in the world. And so one of the things, interestingly enough, that we value highly in our department is an ability to write. In my idea, if you're able to write, if you're able to communicate orally, that is how you speak and present yourself well as in written form, those are skills that are going to be important to you. Now, specifically, our graduates have gone on and worked in design firms, in companies here locally in Chattanooga, places in Indianapolis, New York, Oregon, among others. Others have gone into education, in secondary or post-secondary education. Some are practicing studio artists that frankly make an income over the sales of their art, whether it's through painting, or most often it's through commercial-based photography, or even in ceramics and designing and building their own studios. We have students that have gone on to advance their degree, and are working in higher education, or are accumulating grants as such. Those are just some of the pieces, and I'll let Dr. Whitebrook fill in the gaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered most of the main avenues. I would also say that one of the really delightful things about being a professor and an art major is seeing the unexpected places where your students end up. So we have a recent graduate who became very interested in textiles and in garment fabrication while she was here, and so now she's working full time at a seamstress, where she's like altering wedding dresses, and she altered the wedding dress for her best friend that also graduated from our department. Or we have students who end up in theater makeup or who are doing hairdressing. So one of the things I really love about our department is that there's not a hierarchy of what our like best students are going to do. There's not a kind of preferencing of, if you're really good, you'll become a full-time artist who's making money off of your work. And if you're okay, then you'll go the commercial route and you'll, become a designer, you'll become a photographer, something like that. I think we really all try to emphasize that because we believe in Christ's preeminence in all things, that any of those creative avenues can be a way where you are extending the kingdom of God, where you are using your gifts faithfully, and where you can do great work that is creative, that uses the materials of this world, and that is like that you are culture makers, not just consumers. And I think that's something that I really love about our focus or emphasis.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing that. And another thing, I guess, as someone from the outside that got to see art, I feel like a lot of, there's a culture, and I'd love for y'all to speak to it more about art, that even non-art majors want to be a part of. They want to get involved in. So how have y'all created an environment within the art department that has really helped celebrate and encourage students, even while being really rigorous as well?
I'll let Dr. Whiteberg start with that.
I think there's a couple of things. One, I think we have been very purposeful about our space. I won't say too much about that. I'll let Professor Morton talk a little bit more about our space, but we do have a beautiful building that has been purposefully constructed so that people want to be there. Like you want to hang out in the studios, you want to be in that space. And I think that has had a big impact on being able to create a culture, because culture happens when people are together, and people don't want to be together if the space is crummy. So we have that. And I think we also, we laugh about this, but we are a department that likes to throw parties. So whenever we like to celebrate things. So when we have an exhibition from a visiting artist in our gallery, when we are having our senior capstone thesis shows, we throw parties for them. There's cheese and there's crackers and there's chocolate, and we try to make it an event where people want to be, and where anybody is welcome as well, that you don't have to be an art major, that you don't have to be an art student at all, but that these are, we work hard to bring artists onto campus who are asking questions that we think would be interesting and beneficial to our community as a whole. And we encourage our seniors, when they're working on their thesis projects, to really think about the Covenant community as their primary audience. What questions do you want to ask of your peers, of your professors? And then I think we do we've learned the importance of ritual. Like we believe in embodiment. We believe that you don't just love what you know, but you develop your affections through these repeated acts that you do. And so honestly, part of developing a culture as a department has been setting kind of certain expectations. Every year you can expect to have our seniors all present short presentations for proposing their capstone projects. Every year you can expect to have these capstone openings that are, our big parties in our workshop. Every year you can expect to have Professor Morton make you an omelet in the 2D studio. Every year you can expect to have a week where everybody tries to wear as many patterns as possible at the same time. And so it's those kinds of rhythms that I think have really contributed to a strong culture as a department. And it's things that our alumni still remember and still want to be a part of even.
Yeah. So now I'm finishing my 20th year at Covenant College, and I came at the invitation of Ed Kellogg, who's now our emeritus faculty. And it's important to realize that, that he set a kind of foundation of what the art department would be. It would be a place where people would work. When I came here, I was self-conscious that I wanted to be more Van Gogh than to be Cézanne. These are two 19th century artists who worked in France. Van Gogh from the Netherlands and Cézanne himself from France. Cézanne, he left the city and he kind of sequestered himself in his studio along with his wife and had a lovely life making art. Van Gogh came to France and he wanted to build a community. He wanted friends. He wanted people. And he wanted to create an artist colony, although I don't know if he called it that. And so Van Gogh was really social. And so when I first got here, I was alone and I needed friends. And so my motto was, the door is open, the answer is yes. So students came, knock on the door. You ask Dr. Whitebird. She invented all kinds of classes. But more specifically, we really are very interested in that human connection. And so if you are on our campus and you come see our facility and other places, one of the things that folks told us about the Art Barn, which was the former building we worked, was they told us two things. They said, this building is so different than other building on campus. We need a place that's other. And then secondly, this building, this space, and what you do here, it's so welcoming and it invites us in and it's connected to nature. And so the other thing is we are a welcoming community, and that is our culture. And I would say the other thing that's sort of as part of our culture is we are connected to Covenant College. We are not just an art department. We want our students to get a Covenant College education. We want them to take classes in the philosophy department or the biblical theological studies department or the biology department or English and all those sorts of things so that they can bring their resources into the artist studio. And that's the thing that I valued about teaching at Covenant versus at an art school, because when I talked about a Platonic ideal, Covenant College student understood what I was talking about. I didn't have to do a lot of work by comparison elsewhere. So in summary, how about I put it this way? Somebody the other day said, do you spend your department budget on coffee beans? And I said, yes. And somebody said, how do you get away from that? I said, well, we're creating culture. This is, we need coffee beans to make this department work, or at least this professor work.
That's great. That's good. Yeah, the party department, right?
Yeah. Although not a costume party, although we could get into that.
All right. Okay. Well, kind of this week, at least with dressing for Pattern Week, there's some of that.
Okay.
But is there anything that you would like to share that I haven't asked yet? Either of y'all?
I want to just add on to this idea of a Covenant College education a little bit more. There at times there's this tension between students that want to spend a lot of time making art and having some perhaps difficulty with some of the academics and such, or potentially feeling marginalized on the campus, just feeling like, wait, where do I fit here? I think one of the things that we can speak about is what does it mean to be an outsider? And that might sound strange for a person like me because I'm a white male. But I know that it's taken a little while uh, uh, for my colleagues to sort of really sort of understand what it is that we're trying to do in the art department. The idea of art, everybody understands, but what happens when the art looks and acts differently than what they might expect? And so, one thing I would say that the art department is primarily an advocate for the student. Our number one job is for the student. Um, and and there are many things that can sidetrack us from that. But right now, our focus, Dr. Whitebrow and mine, are helping our seniors graduate and helping them create a very compelling and meaningful, committed senior capstone experience, even while they're displaced. That is our primary goal.
Yeah, and I think I would just want to have my final thought be that when we had to make this, hard decision to close the campus for the rest of the semester, my very first thought was, what are we going to do with our seniors? They've been working and thinking so much about these capstone projects. They had done some really exciting, interesting things. And quite honestly, I think that the greatest affirmation that we could have as professors has come from seeing our seniors be able to be resiliently creative in this exact circumstance. So that when they were faced with the reality that what they had been imagining was no longer possible, that they took it as an opportunity to really sort of drill down to the core of what their work was about, to what they wanted to do. And they are making things right now that are even stronger than what they had initially proposed. And so just as a professor, to be able to see our graduating seniors have that capacity for creative thought, to be able to pivot and to reimagine things, even at a late stage in the game, is I think it's a real testimony to us putting a priority on the creative process, on an approach that emphasizes faithfulness rather than achievement, or rather than fulfilling a certain kind of style or something like that. That what we are after, again, is this kind of generative, creative culture making that fulfills the creation mandate, quite honestly. And I'm really, really proud of them for doing that.
Yeah, stay tuned for the Instagram posts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, I was about to give y'all a shout out. Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Y'all are really fun, and I am glad that I could help facilitate y'all's thoughts to be shared. To stay connected, they have one of the best Instagrams, which is really fun to keep up with them that way. So yeah, thanks guys so much, and I hope y'all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.